it seems to me that those factors you mentioned are part of the strength of the House of Lords, and they're the reason why the House of Lords is actually the most effective part of Parliament at the moment. That they've stopped the government on about 100 occasions in the last 10 years, something the Commons can't do, even though the Labour peers are the largest single party grouping in the Lords. They're still able to follow their consciences because they've got tenure and are not subject to electoral pressures and whips and so forth. And it seems to me that I'm against, I'm afraid here, all three major parties at the moment, because they all seem to favour an elected House of Lords. It seems to me that electing the House of Lords would be disastrous. It would be the end of the second chamber, really, as an effective body, because they'll just be a clone of the Commons. Not necessarily a political clone. I mean, it might be if you had an election for the House of Lords at the same time as the general election, almost exactly a clone. Mm-hmm. But even if you had elections at different times, so that you get more votes against the sitting administration, you're still going to get only professional politicians standing for office, and probably quite a few, because it's a rather nicer position not to have to worry about constituency affairs. And you're going to get the political class in the House of Lords subject to all the party political pressures, and they won't be able to take an independent view. So I think it's very important that the House of Lords should be largely elected and should represent different groups who are not part of the political class as we know it. What's wrong with the House of Lords is not that, it's the appointment system under which we get failed MPs and unseated MPs and speakers who've been effectively sacked, put into the Lords. That has to stop, and there has to be some other system of appointment. But we found a way of appointing judges, and I don't see why it can't be done for the House of Lords. The problem, of course, is that a peerage is an honour as well as a political position.
And it causes obfuscation because of the mix.
Some people are content simply to have the honour, and indeed have been given a peerage simply to be an honour. And I'm not quite sure how you solve that unless you divorce peerages completely from the House of Lords and call it a Senate. I wouldn't myself want to do that. I would have hoped that some other way could be found, and that one should put up with a certain number of anomalies if on the whole the system works, which I think it does, far better than the House of Commons anyway. Most commentators agree that the House of Lords is immensely effective because of the width of expertise and range, even social classes and racial groupings in the House of Lords is far more diverse than the House of Commons, and very difficult to create that if you are starting from scratch. It has actually worked surprisingly well given the defects in the appointment system.